What would you do if you found out your drink had been spiked by some rich creep? But what if the person who saved you was even more dangerous? Today, I'm going to tell you the unbelievable true story of Jessica Parker. She was a single mom working a bunch of jobs to take care of her 5-year-old daughter, and she thought she was just working another fancy event. Little did she know that Lorenzo Santangelo, a 40-year-old Italian mafia boss, was watching her from across the room when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. When Lorenzo saw what was happening, he moved super fast, walked right up to Jessica, and said 2 words that would save her life and change everything. Don't talk. What happened next involved predators in expensive suits, a protective Italian patriarch who lived by old-world codes of honor, and a love story that proved sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is exactly the one you need. Jessica Parker carefully balanced the silver tray as she made her way through the crowd of rich people at Romano's, the fanciest Italian restaurant in Manhattan. At 29, she'd gotten really good at being an invisible server, being there just enough to know what people wanted, but staying out of the way enough to avoid getting hit on by guys who thought their money meant they could get more than just dinner service. Tonight's private event was exactly the kind of high-paying job Jessica needed. The catering company had called her specifically because she was professional, experienced, and desperate enough to work the late shift that other servers didn't want. With her 5-year-old daughter, Emma, sleeping at her neighbor, Mrs. Chen's apartment, Jessica could really focus on earning the rent money she needed by tomorrow. The event was a party for Blackstone Investment Group, a private equity firm known for making billion-dollar deals and throwing parties that cost more than most people made in a year. The guests were exactly what Jessica expected. Older guys in expensive suits talking about deals over wine that cost more per bottle than Jessica made in a week, with women young enough to be their daughters, laughing at jokes that weren't funny and agreeing with opinions they clearly didn't have. Jessica had been working events like this for 3 years, ever since Emma's father, David, had decided that being a dad was too much and disappeared to find himself in Europe with his yoga instructor. The work was exhausting and sometimes made her feel bad, but it paid well enough to keep Jessica and Emma in their small but clean apartment in Queens. As she refilled champagne glasses and collected empty plates, Jessica tried not to think about the overdue electricity bill, or the fact that Emma needed new shoes before school started next month. She focused instead on the big tips these events usually brought in and the overtime pay that would help her catch up on bills. "Miss, could I get another martini?" Jessica turned to see Richard Blackstone himself, the 60-something CEO whose company was throwing the party. He looked distinguished in that way that expensive healthcare and personal trainers can make any man look. He had silver hair and the kind of confident smile that came from never being told no. "Of course, Mr. Blackstone, vodka martini, extra dry, 3 olives. You remembered. Impressive." Blackstone's smile was friendly, but the way his eyes stayed on Jessica made her uncomfortable. "You're not like the usual servers they send. You're special." Jessica put on a professional smile. "Thank you, sir. I'll get that martini right away." As she walked toward the bar, Jessica felt Blackstone watching her. It wasn't unusual. Rich guys at these events often treated servers like decorations, saying things or assuming things that Jessica had learned to ignore. But there was something different about Blackstone's attention, something that made her skin crawl in a way she couldn't quite figure out. The bartender, a young Italian guy named Marco, who had been friendly all night, made Blackstone's martini quickly. "Be careful with that one," Marco said quietly as he gave Jessica the drink. "I've worked a lot of these Blackstone events. He has a reputation." "What kind of reputation?" Marco looked around to make sure no one was listening. "The kind where young women who work his parties sometimes can't remember how they got home, if you know what I mean." Jessica felt a chill go down her back. She had heard rumors about certain rich clients, whispers among the catering staff about guys who thought their money could buy more than just service, but she had never seen it herself. "Thanks for the warning," Jessica said, taking the martini. As she walked back toward Blackstone's table, Jessica noticed another person in the restaurant that she had been trying to avoid all night. In the back corner, at a table that seemed to command respect from everyone, sat a man who had a different kind of power than the investment bankers and hedge fund managers filling the room. Lorenzo Santangelo was probably around 40, with the kind of masculine presence that made people move out of his way when he walked by. His dark hair was perfectly styled, with a little bit of gray at the temples. His olive skin hinted at his Mediterranean background, and his charcoal suit was tailored so well it looked like it was painted on. But it was his eyes that had caught Jessica's attention earlier in the night. Dark brown, almost black, with an intensity that made it seem like he saw everything while showing nothing. Unlike the other guests, Lorenzo ate his meal like he really enjoyed it, spoke to the waitstaff politely, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had never had to yell to be obeyed. Jessica had noticed that even the restaurant's management treated him differently, going above and beyond normal customer service. As she got closer to Blackstone's table, Jessica caught Lorenzo's eye for a second. He was watching the interaction with what seemed like mild interest, though something in his expression suggested he was more aware than he looked. "Here you go, Mr. Blackstone," Jessica said, putting down the martini. "Wonderful. I've been thinking. You're clearly too smart to just be serving drinks. Have you ever thought about other opportunities?" Jessica's professional smile almost disappeared. "I'm pretty happy with my job right now, thank you." "Are you sure? Because I could offer you something much more, something that would set you up for life." The way Blackstone said lucrative made Jessica's stomach turn. She had heard offers like this before, though never said so directly. "That's very kind, but I'm not interested. Is there anything else I can get you tonight?" Blackstone's smile didn't change, but something cold flashed in his eyes. "Think about it. I'll be here for another hour or so. No need to rush." Jessica nodded and turned to leave, but Blackstone grabbed her wrist gently, too gently, in a way that would look friendly to anyone watching, but felt controlling to Jessica. "Actually, why don't you take a quick break? You look tired. Have a drink with me." Before Jessica could answer, Blackstone was signaling to Marco, the bartender. "A champagne for the lady, the Dom Perignon." "Really, that's not necessary," Jessica started. "I insist. You've been working so hard all night. The least I can do is offer you something special." Jessica felt stuck. Turning down a drink from the host could cost her this job and future jobs with the catering company. But accepting felt like crossing a line she didn't want to cross. "That's very generous," Jessica said carefully. "But I'm still on duty. Just one drink. I promise it will be worth your while." Marco showed up with a flute of champagne that probably cost more than Jessica's weekly grocery budget. As he put it down, he gave Jessica a look that seemed like a warning, but she couldn't refuse without making a scene. "Thank you," Jessica said, picking up the glass but not drinking. "To new opportunities," Blackstone said, raising his martini in a toast. Jessica was about to take a polite sip of the champagne when a hand landed gently but firmly on her shoulder. "Don't drink." The voice was deep, had an Italian accent, and had an authority that made Jessica freeze. She turned to see Lorenzo Santangelo standing behind her, his dark eyes fixed on something that made his jaw tighten with anger. "Don't drink," Lorenzo continued, his voice still quiet, but with a tone that made the hair on Jessica's arms stand up. "And don't say anything until I tell you to." Jessica followed Lorenzo's eyes and saw what he was looking at. Blackstone's face, which had turned pale with what looked like real fear. "Mr. Santangelo," Blackstone said, his voice not as confident as it had been with Jessica. "I wasn't expecting to see you tonight." "Clearly," Lorenzo replied, his accent making the words sound like a threat. "Jessica Karamia, please step away from the table." Jessica didn't know who Lorenzo was or why Blackstone seemed so scared of him, but everything in her told her to do what Lorenzo said. She moved back, still holding the champagne flute. Lorenzo grabbed a napkin from the table and gently took the champagne glass from Jessica's hand. Then, to her shock, he dipped the corner of the napkin into the champagne and held it up to the light. "Rohypnol," Lorenzo said casually, like he was talking about the weather. "Also known as the date rape drug. Colorless, odorless, and impossible to detect unless you know what to look for." Jessica's blood ran cold. The champagne. Blackstone had insisted she drink the champagne. Had seemed upset when she hesitated. "I don't know what you're talking about," Blackstone started. "I am not talking about anything," Lorenzo interrupted, his voice getting colder. I am stating facts. You drugged this woman's drink to knock her out so you could assault her. I saw you slip the powder into the glass while Marco was distracted. Jessica felt like the room was spinning. She had been seconds away from drinking that champagne, seconds away from becoming another victim of a predator who used his money and power to hurt vulnerable women. That's a serious accusation, Blackstone said, his voice shaking. You can't prove. Lorenzo pulled out his phone and showed Blackstone the screen. Security cameras are wonderful things, especially when you know which angles to watch and which footage to save. The color drained from Blackstone's face as he realized Lorenzo had video evidence of him drugging Jessica's drink. Now, Lorenzo continued, his voice still calm, you are going to leave this restaurant right now. You are going to close your account here and never come back. You are going to cancel any events your company has planned at any place I have an interest in. You can't dictate. Lorenzo kept talking like Blackstone hadn't said anything. You are going to transfer $50,000 to a charity that helps victims of sexual assault tonight, within the hour. That's extortion. Lorenzo smiled, but it was the scariest thing Jessica had ever seen. That is justice, Mr. Blackstone. Because if you prefer, we can talk about this with some of my associates who are less diplomatic than I am. Blackstone looked around the restaurant like he was hoping for support, but Jessica noticed that the other guests were avoiding eye contact. Whatever power Lorenzo had, it was clearly enough that no one wanted to cross him. Fine, Blackstone said finally. But this isn't over. Yes, it is, Lorenzo said simply. Because if you ever approach this woman again, if you ever try to hurt another woman in my city, if I even hear your name connected to behavior like this, then you will find out that there are consequences that money can't get you out of. Blackstone grabbed his stuff and left without another word, followed by some of his friends who clearly wanted to get away from whatever had just happened. After they were gone, Lorenzo turned to Jessica, his face changing from scary to concerned. Are you all right, Karamia? Jessica stared at him, trying to understand what had just happened. You saved me. I couldn't just stand by and watch a predator drug an innocent woman. But how did you know? How did you see what he was doing? Lorenzo's smile became a little sad. In my line of work, you learn to watch for certain things. Men like Blackstone, they think they're invisible because of their money and status. But I've been watching predators for a long time. Jessica realized she was shaking. The full weight of what she had almost gone through hit her all at once. I could have. But you weren't. I was there and you're safe. Jessica looked at Lorenzo, really looked at him, trying to figure out who this man was and why he had helped the stranger. The expensive suit, the way the staff treated him, the obvious fear he had caused in Blackstone, it all pointed to someone with a lot of power and influence. Who are you? Jessica asked straight out. Lorenzo looked at her face for a moment. I am someone who believes that women should be protected, not preyed upon. Someone who thinks that wealth and power should be used to help people, not hurt them. It wasn't really an answer, and they both knew it. Jessica, right? Lorenzo continued. That's what Blackstone called you. Yes, Jessica Parker. It is a pleasure to meet you, Jessica Parker, even under these circumstances. I am Lorenzo Santangelo. The name didn't mean anything to Jessica, but she could tell it meant something to the restaurant staff who were secretly watching them. Mr. Santangelo, I don't know how to thank you. No thanks are needed, but I have a question if you don't mind. Of course. Do you often work events like this? Private parties, rich clients, late hours. Jessica suddenly felt embarrassed. When I can get them, the pay is good and I have bills to pay. Children. Jessica nodded. A daughter, Emma. She's 5. Something changed in Lorenzo's face. Not pity, but understanding, like her situation had made something clear for him. And you work alone at these events? No security, no protection? The catering company provides some security, but Jessica trailed off, realizing how useless that protection had been. Jessica, what happened tonight wasn't random. Men like Blackstone, they target women they see as vulnerable, alone, desperate for money. Women who work alone at late-night events who can't afford to complain because they might lose their jobs. The truth of his words hit Jessica hard. She had been targeted because she seemed weak, because Blackstone thought she wouldn't report him and couldn't fight back. "I need this job," Jessica said quietly. "I can't afford to not work these kinds of events." "No, you cannot. But you also cannot afford to work them without protection." Lorenzo paused, thinking about what he was going to say. "I have a proposition for you if you're willing to hear it." Jessica felt nervous. Men who made offers to women they had just saved from other men were usually not offering anything good. "What kind of proposition?" "I own several legitimate businesses in this city. Restaurants, event planning companies, hospitality services. I always need reliable, professional staff who can handle high-end clients." "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a job that pays well, provides security, and makes sure you never have to worry about men like Blackstone again." Jessica stared at him, trying to figure out what the catch was. "Why would you do that for someone you just met?" "Because you remind me of someone very important to me. Because I believe good people deserve a chance to have a better life. And because I think you would be good at the work I have in mind." "What kind of work?" "Event coordination for my restaurants and private clients. You would manage service staff, work with caterers, make sure events go smoothly. You would use the skills you already have, but in a place where you're safe and respected." The offer sounded too good to be true, which made Jessica suspicious. "Mr. Santangelo, I appreciate what you did tonight, but I don't know anything about you. For all I know, you could be just as dangerous as Blackstone, just better at hiding it." Lorenzo nodded. "That's exactly the right question to ask. You should never trust offers that seem too good to be true, especially from men you don't know." He pulled out his phone and showed Jessica the screen. "This is the website for Santangelo Hospitality. You can look up the company, read reviews, talk to current employees. I'm not asking you to trust me without question. I'm asking you to look into the opportunity and decide for yourself." Jessica looked at the professional website, seeing the addresses of several fancy places around the city. "Take the weekend to think about it," Lorenzo continued. "If you decide you're interested, call the number on the website and ask to speak to Maria Santangelo, my sister. She's in charge of human resources and can answer any questions about the job." Lorenzo handed Jessica a business card, then reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is your pay for tonight, plus a bonus for what you went through. Consider it compensation for Blackstone's behavior." Jessica opened the envelope and gasped. There was more money inside than she usually made in 2 months. "I can't accept this." "Yes, you can, and you should. You have a daughter to take care of, and that's more important than pride." The way Lorenzo said it, matter-of-fact, without being mean, made Jessica realize he understood being broke in a way that rich guys usually didn't. "Mr. Santangelo, Lorenzo, I don't understand why you're being so generous to a stranger." Lorenzo's face changed for a second, like he was remembering something painful. "When I was young, my mother worked a lot of jobs to take care of my sister and me after my father died. She was beautiful, desperate, and completely vulnerable to men who saw those things as chances to take advantage. She wasn't always as lucky as you were tonight." The simple statement had a weight of history and pain that made Jessica's heart hurt. "I am sorry," she said. "It was a long time ago, but it taught me that protecting women who can't protect themselves isn't charity. It's a responsibility." Lorenzo stood up, adjusting his jacket with the kind of practiced grace that showed he had expensive habits. "Think about my offer, Jessica, and in the meantime, please be careful about the events you work. Men like Blackstone are common in these circles." As Lorenzo turned to leave, Jessica suddenly felt scared at the thought of him disappearing from her life. "Wait," she called. "How do I know you're not too good to be true?" Lorenzo smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "You don't know, but tomorrow, you can call Maria and ask her to tell you about the other single mothers who work for our company. Ask them about their experiences, their safety, their job satisfaction, then decide for yourself." After Lorenzo left, Jessica finished her shift in a daze, constantly thinking about what had happened. She had almost been drugged and attacked by a man who thought his money gave him the right to her body, then been saved by another powerful man who seemed really interested in helping her have a better life. The next morning, Jessica sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, researching everything she could find about Lorenzo Santangelo and his businesses. What she found was interesting and a little worrying. Santangelo Hospitality was a real company with great reviews and several successful businesses. Lorenzo himself was mentioned in business magazines as a successful business owner with interests in restaurants, real estate, and event planning. But there were also hints of something more, references to old-fashioned business practices and traditional family values that suggested connections outside of normal corporate activities. Jessica called the number on the business card and asked to speak with Maria Santangelo. "You must be Jessica," Maria said warmly when she answered the phone. "Lorenzo told me you might call. He said you had a rough night." "Yes, that's right. He offered me a job, but I wanted to find out more about the company before I decided." "Of course, why don't you come in this afternoon? I can show you around our main restaurant and introduce you to some of our staff. Many of them are women in situations similar to yours." That afternoon, Jessica took Emma to the playground and then went to Little Italy for her meeting with Maria Santangelo. The neighborhood was different from anywhere Jessica had been before, older, more traditional, with family restaurants and shops that looked like they had been there for a long time. Santangelo's was in a beautiful old building that had obviously been restored with care and at great cost. The restaurant was fancy but welcoming, with an atmosphere that suggested real hospitality instead of just showing off. Maria Santangelo was in her mid-30s, with the same dark hair and intelligent eyes as her brother, but with a kindness that made Jessica feel comfortable right away. She greeted Jessica like an old friend and introduced her to several staff members who were happy to talk about their experiences working for the Santangelo family. "I was a single mom working 3 different catering jobs when Lorenzo hired me," said Carmen, a woman about Jessica's age who now managed events for the restaurant. "I was exhausted, barely able to pay rent, and always worried about my son's safety when I had to work late. Now I have regular hours, good pay, health insurance, and I never have to worry about bad behavior from clients." "How does he make sure of that?" Jessica asked. "By making it clear that his employees are under his protection," said another woman named Rosa. "Word gets around in certain circles. When people know you work for Lorenzo Santangelo, they treat you with respect." "What does that mean exactly?" Maria jumped in to answer. "My brother has a lot of influence in this city's business world. People who treat his employees badly tend to find that their own business relationships get complicated." Jessica sensed there was more to the story, but she also noticed that every woman she talked to seemed happy, confident, and treated well. Whatever Lorenzo's methods were, they seemed to work at protecting his staff. "Jessica," Maria said as they finished the tour, "I want to be honest with you about my brother. He's a good man who takes care of the people who work for him, but his business relationships go beyond normal corporate connections. Some people find that concerning." "Are you saying he's involved in illegal things?" "I'm saying that he operates by principles that value loyalty, family, and community over strict legal definitions. Whether that makes him someone you want to work for is something only you can decide." Jessica went home that night with a lot to think about. The job offer was everything she needed: good pay, regular hours, safety, benefits, and the kind of career development she had been dreaming of. But it also required her to accept employment from a man whose power clearly extended into areas she didn't fully comprehend. That night, as Jessica tucked Emma into bed, her daughter inquired about her day. "Mommy, why do you look worried?" "I'm thinking about a new job, sweetheart. It would be good for us, but it's a big decision." "Would we have more money?" "Yes, we would." "And would you be home more?" "Yes, I think I would be." "Then it sounds like a good job, Mommy." The simple logic of a 5-year-old cut through all of Jessica's complicated concerns. She needed steady work, good pay, and security. Lorenzo was offering all of those things, and his motives, whatever they might be, were less important than the results. The next morning, Jessica called Maria and accepted the position. Her first day at Santangelo's was unlike any work experience she had ever encountered. Maria spent hours training her on the company's systems and standards, introducing her to vendors and clients, and explaining the philosophy behind their service approach. "We treat every event like it is for our own family," Maria explained. "That means attention to detail, genuine hospitality, and absolute discretion. discretion. Many of our clients value privacy. They trust us to provide excellent service without gossip or publicity about their personal affairs. Jessica soon learned that Santangelo's clientele included politicians, celebrities, business leaders, and others who preferred to keep their private events away from public scrutiny. The work was challenging and required a level of sophistication she had never developed in her previous jobs. But it was also fascinating and well compensated. More importantly, Jessica felt safer and more respected than she ever had in any workplace. Lorenzo's influence was subtle but unmistakable. Clients treated staff with courtesy. There were never inappropriate advances or uncomfortable situations, and everyone understood that Santangelo employees were not to be taken advantage of. Jessica had been working at the restaurant for 3 weeks when she had her first real conversation with Lorenzo since the night he had saved her. He appeared at the restaurant during a busy dinner service, moving through the dining room with the kind of natural authority that made staff members straighten their postures and guests nod respectfully. "Jessica," he said, approaching her station near the private dining rooms. "How are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you. Maria has been wonderful, and the work is exactly what I hoped it would be. And Emma, she is adjusting well to your new schedule." Jessica was surprised that he remembered her daughter's name. "Yes. She loves that I'm home for dinner most nights now." "Good. Children need their mother's present, not constantly worried about money and safety." There was something in the way Lorenzo said it that suggested personal experience. And Jessica remembered his story about his own mother's struggles. "Mr. Santangelo." "Lorenzo, please." "Lorenzo, I wanted to thank you again for what you did that night and for this opportunity. It's changed our lives." Lorenzo's expression softened. "You deserve stability, Jessica. You work hard. You care for your daughter. You treat people with kindness. Those qualities should be rewarded, not exploited. I keep wondering why you helped me. I mean, the real reason." Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words. "When I saw what Blackstone was doing to you, I saw my mother 30 years ago. A beautiful, hard-working woman being preyed upon by a man who thought his money entitled him to whatever he wanted. What happened to her? She survived, but barely, and she spent the rest of her life making sure that my sister and I understood the difference between power used to protect and power used to exploit." Jessica studied Lorenzo's face, seeing pain and determination in equal measure. "Is that why you do what you do? Protect people?" "It is part of it, yes. My family has resources, influence, connections that can make life better or worse for people in this community. I choose to use those resources to protect rather than prey even when it's dangerous. Everything worthwhile is dangerous, cara mia. The question is whether the risk serves a good purpose." Over the following months, Jessica's life improved in ways she had never imagined possible. Her work at Santangelo's was challenging and rewarding, allowing her to use skills she had developed while learning new ones. Her financial situation stabilized to the point where she could afford a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, and Emma was thriving in a new school that actually had resources for its students. More importantly, Jessica felt like she belonged somewhere for the first time since Emma's father had left. The Santangelo family businesses were exactly that. Family operations where employees were treated like extended relatives, where personal problems were addressed collectively, where success was shared and difficulties were supported. Jessica also found herself developing feelings for Lorenzo that went beyond gratitude and professional respect. He was unlike any man she had ever met. Powerful but gentle, commanding but respectful, dangerous but protective. When he visited the restaurant, he always made time to ask about Emma, to inquire about Jessica's goals and dreams, to offer advice or assistance without being condescending. The attraction was clearly mutual. Jessica caught Lorenzo watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with business, and their conversations gradually became more personal, more intimate, more charged with possibility. The turning point came on a Friday evening when Jessica was working late to coordinate a weekend wedding reception. Most of the staff had gone home, and Jessica was alone in the restaurant reviewing final details when she heard someone enter through the private entrance Lorenzo used. "Jessica, you should not be here so late by yourself." Jessica looked up to see Lorenzo approaching, his expression concerned. "I wanted to make sure everything was perfect for tomorrow's event." It's the first wedding I've coordinated entirely myself, and I am sure it will be beautiful. But it is past 10 o'clock, and you have a daughter waiting at home. Actually, Emma is having a sleepover at her friend's house tonight. I thought it would be a good opportunity to catch up on work. Lorenzo studied her face in the soft restaurant lighting. You work too hard, Karamia, says the man who owns multiple businesses and probably works 18-hour days. That is different. I do not have a small child depending on me. No, but you have dozens of employees depending on you. Hundreds of people who look to you for protection and support. Lorenzo smiled at that. You see too much, Jessica Parker. I see a man who carries more responsibility than anyone should have to carry alone. They stood looking at each other across the empty restaurant, the air between them charged with months of growing attraction and unspoken feelings. Jessica, Lorenzo said quietly, there are things about my life, my business, my responsibilities that make relationships complicated. I know. Do you really understand what it means to care for someone in my position? Jessica set down her planning materials and moved closer to Lorenzo. I understand that you saved my life. I understand that you've given me and my daughter security we never had before. I understand that you're the first man I've ever met who makes me feel both safe and alive at the same time. Lorenzo's dark eyes searched her face. And what about the danger? What about the moral complications? What about the fact that my world operates by rules that most people find unacceptable? What about the fact that your rules include protecting single mothers from predators? What about the fact that your power is used to help people instead of harm them? What about the fact that you've shown me more respect and kindness than any man ever has? Lorenzo stepped closer, close enough that Jessica could smell his cologne, could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. You do not know everything about my life, Jessica. I know enough. I know you're a good man who makes difficult choices for the right reasons. And if those choices sometimes involve violence, if the methods I use to protect people are not always legal or conventional. Jessica thought about Blackstone, about the terror in his eyes when Lorenzo had confronted him, about the immediate way he had backed down and disappeared from her life forever. Then I'm grateful that someone is willing to make those choices and use those methods to keep people like me and Emma safe. Lorenzo cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses that spoke of a more physical life than his business suit suggested. You could have any man, Jessica. Someone clean, conventional, safe. I don't want any man. I want you. When Lorenzo kissed her, it was with a passion that had been building for months. A connection that went beyond attraction to something deeper and more powerful. Jessica felt like she was finally completely home. 6 months later, Jessica moved into Lorenzo's penthouse apartment with Emma, who had been completely charmed by the man she called Mr. Lorenzo and his promises to teach her to cook real Italian food. The apartment was transformed by their presence. Children's drawings on the refrigerator, toys in the living room, the sounds of a family where there had once been only elegant solitude. Jessica had learned more about Lorenzo's business interests, understanding that his influence extended into areas that weren't always strictly legal, but were always directed toward protecting and supporting his community. She had met other families connected to the Sant'Angelo organization, seen the network of mutual support and loyalty that formed the backbone of Lorenzo's world. Most importantly, she had seen how Lorenzo interacted with Emma. Patient, gentle, genuinely interested in her thoughts and dreams. He attended school events, helped with homework, and treated Jessica's daughter with the kind of respect and affection that suggested he saw her as family, not just an accessory to his relationship with Jessica. Do you ever regret it? Lorenzo asked one evening as they stood on the balcony of their apartment, watching Emma play in the secured garden below while Maria supervised. Regret what? Choosing this life, choosing me, all the complications that come with being part of my world. Jessica looked at the man who had saved her from assault, given her meaningful work, provided security for her daughter, and loved them both with a devotion that never wavered. I regret that it took me so long to find you, Jessica said simply. Lorenzo pulled her closer, his arms strong and warm around her. Ti amo, Jessica Parker. You and Emma, you are my heart. Ti amo, Anch'io, Jessica replied, proud of the Italian phrases Maria had been teaching her. As they stood together watching Emma play safely in their garden, Jessica thought about that night at Romano's when she had been seconds away from drinking poisoned champagne. She had thought she was working just another catering event, earning money to pay rent and buy groceries. Instead, she had found a protector, a partner, a father for her daughter, and a love that was stronger than any danger they might face together. That's the story of Jessica Parker, the single mom who was saved by 2 words from an Italian mafia boss who saw a predator targeting an innocent woman and decided to intervene. Her story proves that protection can come from unexpected sources, that love can grow from the most unlikely circumstances, and that sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is exactly the hero you need. Jessica and Lorenzo's love story reminds us that strength comes in many forms, that family can be chosen as well as born, and that real love is about respect, protection, and partnership rather than control or possession. If this incredible story moved you and you want to hear more amazing tales of unexpected protection, dangerous romance, and love that conquers all obstacles, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We share new stories every week about real people who discovered that heroes come in all forms and that sometimes the most meaningful relationships begin with the most dangerous moments. What did you think of Jessica and Lorenzo's story? Have you ever been in a situation where a stranger protected you from danger? Would you have accepted Lorenzo's job offer? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing how these stories resonate with your own experiences of unexpected kindness, protection, and love. Remember, sometimes the person who saves you is someone you never expected to trust, and sometimes the most dangerous choice leads to the safest love. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.